Hello and good morning friends, welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, as we promised yesterday that we would be meeting again, would be discussing on microeconomics. So this is the last lecture on microeconomics, and today we would be discussing on advantages and disadvantages of free trade in the first half, whereas in the second half we would be discussing on arguments for and against protection. And for this discussion we have once again with us in our studios Dr. Kamlesh Gakkar. Dr. Kamlesh Gakkar is a professor in the Institute of Management Studies and Research, Maharishi Dayanand University, Rohtak. Dr. Gakkar has given more than 30 years to the teaching profession, and I would say that she has contributed a lot in the fields of academics. A number of her articles, research papers have been published in reputed journals. She has authored numerous books. Number of students have pursued their PhD under her able guidance, and she is working. So let's welcome our guest, Dr. Kamlesh Gakkar. Dr. Gakkar, welcome to the ADCET lecture.
Thank you, Geetika. Dear viewers, today we are going to discuss about advantages and disadvantages of free trade. Firstly, you should know what is the concept of trade. In ordinary language, trade refers to the sale and purchase of goods. Trade comprises of all human activities which regulate goods from their production to distribution. Trade may be internal or external. By internal or domestic trade is meant transactions taking place within the geographical boundaries of a nation or a region. It is also called interregional or home trade. External or international trade, on the other hand, is trade among different countries or trade across political frontiers. According to Anatol Murad, international trade is trade between nations. According to Wasserman and Holtman, international trade consists of transactions between residents of different countries. Now, what is the difference between domestic and international trade? At the deepest level, trade is trade, whether it involves people within the same nation or people in different countries. However, there are three important differences between domestic and international trade. Firstly is expand trading opportunities. International trade expands trading horizons. If people were forced to consume only what they produced in their home country, the world would be poorer on both the material and spiritual planes. Canadians could drink no wine, Americans could eat no bananas, and most of the world would be without jazz and Hollywood movies. Second is sovereign nations. International trade involves people and firms living in different nations. Each nation is a sovereign entity which regulates the flow of people, goods and finance crossing its borders. It is different from domestic trade, where there is a single currency, where trade and money flow freely within the borders and where people can migrate easily to seek new opportunities. Restrictions in the form of tariffs and non-tariff barriers are put on international trade. Another difference is regarding exchange rates. Different currencies are required for making payments to different countries. Value of foreign currency in terms of home currency is called exchange rate. Exchange rates keep on fluctuating and affect international trade. There is no need of foreign currency in domestic trade. Now, what are the sources of international trade in goods and services? Number one is diversity in natural resources. Trade arises due to diversity in the production possibilities among countries. These differences reflect endowments of natural resources. One country may be blessed with a supply of petroleum, while another may have a large amount of fertile land. A mountainous country may generate large amounts of hydroelectric power which it sells to its neighbors, while a country with deep water harbors may become a shipping center. For example, USA lacks the soil and climate to produce tea, and Japan has no iron mines. They have to import these goods. India has to import tin, as the same is not available here. So, because of the diversity in natural resources, countries are dependent upon each other. They are exporting the goods in which they are having plenty and importing the goods in which they are lacking. Another is difference in the tastes. Supposing all the countries are having similar resources, but still trade takes place because of differences in the tastes of the people. A country may be producing one variety of a commodity and exporting it and importing the other variety of the same product. So, for example, India produces cloth on a large scale and also exports it. Nevertheless, she imports different varieties of clothes such as saris made in Japan and other countries. India is producing different varieties of cars and exporting them, but it is also importing cars manufactured in other countries. Happiness of the people increases when they consume large varieties of the same good. Then differences in cost is one of the main determinants of trade. If the costs have been same all over the world, they would never have been trade. These cost differences can be of two types. One is absolute cost difference, another is comparative cost difference. In absolute cost difference, this means that a country can produce a commodity at an absolutely cheaper cost than the other. So, the country would export and produce the commodity where it has absolute advantage and import the commodity in which it has absolute disadvantage. According to Adam Smith, absolute cost difference is the main reason for international trade. Another is the comparative cost difference. This was given by Ricardo. According to this, supposing a country can produce all the commodities at an absolute advantage, and the other country can produce all the commodities at absolute disadvantage. In this case, we have to see where the comparative advantage is higher or where the comparative disadvantage is less. A country should produce and export the commodity in which it has comparatively more advantage or comparatively less disadvantage. And so far as the imports are concerned, they should be in commodities where a country has comparatively less advantage or comparatively more disadvantage. So, it is the comparative difference in the cost which is of greater importance as compared to the absolute difference in the costs. Now, we will see what are the advantages, what are the merits of free trade. Actually, free trade is when there are no restrictions on international trade. So, these advantages are, number one is full use of natural resources. International trade leads to the full utilization of natural resources. Underdeveloped countries are not in a position to use their own mineral resources. Such countries export their raw materials to developed industrial countries where the same are needed the most. International trade results in optimum utilization of resources. Another advantage is of cheaper goods. When production is done according to the comparative cost advantage, then goods are produced and sold at cheaper rates. Due to international trade, we are getting goods at lower rates. Ability to face natural calamities. When natural calamities like famines, flood, epidemic, etc. befall a country, then other countries come to its rescue. When there is a shortage of food grains and pulses, etc., due to bad weather, we import these things from other countries. Then we get varieties of goods. It is because of the international trade that today people are consuming a large variety of goods produced by different countries. This leads to increase in aggregate consumption by the whole world. Standard of living of people rises when they have an opportunity to choose among a large variety of goods. Another advantage is regarding disposal of surplus production. If the production is more than the demand in the home country, and if the factory or the company sells its product only in the home country, it will have to sell it at a very low rate and it will have to suffer losses. But if it sells the surplus output in other countries at genuine rates, it gets profits. So it becomes profitable to dispose of the surplus production because of the international trade. Another is competition. If the countries are not trading with each other, then there is less competition. But in international trade, competition rises and competition always encourages production at a lower cost. Competition leads to more technological progress in the whole world. Wider market is another advantage because of the international trade. Size of the market widens when a country produces not only for its countrymen but for the whole world. This leads to rise of economies of scale, consequently resulting in reduced cost of production. End of monopolistic tendencies. Due to increase in the number of sellers in the international market, monopolistic tendencies come to an end. We know monopoly is not considered good because the monopolist can charge high prices and produce less. So monopolistic tendencies come to an end due to international trade. Availability of raw material. Countries lacking in raw material can import it from other countries and achieve industrialization. Japan has reached the highest stage of industrialization by importing iron ore from the rest of the world. Specialization is another merit of international trade. In international production, each country produces those commodities which it can produce at a relatively lower cost than the other country. This leads to greater specialization, further resulting in better quality and more quantity of products. Possibility of economic development by importing machinery, technical know-how and other ancillary equipment from the developed countries. Underdeveloped countries make the optimum use of their resources. Thus, they are enabled to produce and achieve a higher rate of growth. According to Robertson, trade is an engine of growth. Improvement in the technique of production. With the rise in competition, producers in different countries devise new ways of production to produce the best quality of products. International trade has resulted in technological development. Advantages to different classes, producers, consumers, laborers, all stand to gain from international trade. Increase in national income is the result of international trade. Increased investment in export sectors lead to multiple times rise in the national income due to working of foreign trade multiplier. More employment. Employment rises due to the development of agriculture, industries, banking, trade, etc. International cooperation. Due to international trade, mutual cooperation among the different countries increases. It creates an atmosphere of goodwill and friendship among the trading countries and thus promotes world peace. Cultural relations. There is exchange of culture along with the exchange of goods and services. Sport competitions, film festivals, dance and music concerts are also organized. Our culture has changed a lot due to international trade. Now we will see what are the disadvantages or demerits of international trade. International trade is having certain disadvantages also, which are as following. Number one is exhaustion of natural resources. When raw materials are exported by the underdeveloped countries, natural resources of such countries get exhausted in due course of time. Such countries are losers. They sell raw material at low prices and buy manufactured goods at high prices. Loss to agricultural countries. Demand for agricultural goods is less elastic. Their demand does not rise more in response to fall in prices. Law of diminishing returns also operates in agriculture. So, agriculture based countries don't gain much from international trade. Lopsided development. A country focuses on the production of commodities in which it enjoys comparative advantage. So, a few industries develop and there is no diversification. It results in lopsided development of the country. Dumping. Dumping is the act of selling a commodity at a low price in the foreign market and at a higher price in the home market. This is done to drive out competitors. Home industries are harmed by dumping. China is dumping a lot of its products in the whole world. International rivalry. Many advanced countries vie with each other in order to capture market of a given country. it leads to international rivalry. The two world wars have been the result of this international trade. Political slavery is one of the disadvantages of international trade. We all know that Britishers came to India just for the sake of increasing their international trade, but slowly and slowly they interfered in every sphere of India and colonized India, and we remained their slave for such a long time. So this had been the result of international trade. Decay of domestic industries is another disadvantage, and we have seen this, that as the international trade increases, as the imports of manufactured goods increased from England, the Indian domestic industries were damaged. They could not face competition from the foreign companies which were producing goods with the help of machines and at cheaper rates. So sometimes international trade leads to the decay of domestic industries. Another is the increase in prices. How the international trade can lead to rise in prices. Sometimes exporters go on increasing the exports just to have more and more profits, and this results in reducing the supply of the commodity for home market. So in the home market, people have to pay more because of the scarcity of that commodity which is exported in large quantity. Prices increase and customers are forced to pay more. So international trade sometimes leads to increase in the prices also. Harmful imports can also be there. Sometimes luxuries are being imported or drugs are being imported. We know they adversely affect the health and efficiency of the people, and these type of the imports have been there in various countries and leading to the decline in the health of the people. So this is also one of the bad effects of international trade. Then this leads to dependence of a country on the other countries for sometimes essential raw material or for essential goods. We know dependence is always bad. Supposing a country is dependent upon the other country for its defense equipment or for its raw material to be used for industrialization, and if the other country stops sending the commodity or the product, then the importing country will be adversely affected. So this type of the bad effect of dependence is also there because of the increasing international trade. Then there is fear of overproduction. You know, when a company is producing not only for its country but for a large number of countries, it may not be doing the correct planning, or sometimes it may be producing more than the demand. And if there is overproduction, we should know that overproduction leads to unemployment in the economy, leads to fall in the income of the country, because to sell that overproduced product, it will have to sell it at a very low rate, and this may result in unemployment and recession. Then effect of economic evils. You know, in a capitalistic economy, sometimes there is a boom, sometimes there is a depression, and if there is a international trade, these evils of recession and depression spread to the whole world easily, because countries are exporting and importing, they are dependent upon each other. We all know that the recession in the whole world in 2008 was actually started in US. So, because of the international trade, these evils spread quickly. Then specialization, no doubt it is good that it leads to the best quality product and there is a technological progress, but it has its bad effect also, that the persons who become specialized in their field, they get only restricted employment opportunities, they can't be employed to the other sectors, they will be employed only where they have got the skills. So, this type of the bad impact of international trade can be there. Then it is harmful to underdeveloped countries. No doubt trade is taking place between both developed and underdeveloped countries, but developed countries are gaining the most. How? Because the developing economies have unfavorable terms of trade. They are generally exporting primary goods whose demand is less elastic. Their demand does not rise much with the rise in incomes of the people. So, they can't charge more for their exports. On the other hand, they are importing manufactured goods whose demand is elastic and naturally they have to pay more, or they can say their demand for such goods goes on increasing. So, they have to pay more for their imports and they are charging less for their exports. So, the main gain goes to the developed economies rather than to the developing countries. Problem of balance of payments may also aggravate sometime because of the international trade, because certain countries become more and more dependent upon their imports. If their exports are not increasing in the same proportion as the imports are rising, so they are required to make more payments to the whole world. So, payments are more than the receipts and they find a problem in the balance of payments. Thus, we see there are advantages as well as disadvantages of free trade, but still international trade is very essential. That is why globalization is increasing day by day. Thank you. Dear viewers, in this session, I am going to tell you about the arguments for and against protection. Now, firstly, you should know what is protection. Protection refers to the foreign trade policy of encouraging home industries by giving subsidies to domestic producers, or more usually by imposing custom duties on products. Protection comprises of all policy measures which raise the price of imports and safeguards the interest of domestic producers. Tariff or customs duty is the most common method of protection. Tariff barriers refer to the taxes imposed to restrict international trade. Now, dear students, actually why protection is given? So, supposing the domestic industries are the new ones and they are producing a product at a high rate, and the imported goods are got at cheaper rates because they are produced by the foreign companies which have been working for a long time. Now, this domestic industry can't develop because it cannot sell at a low rate, and if it is selling at a high rate, it does not get the market. So, then domestic industries ask for help and they are to be protected so that they can grow, they can develop, they can increase the employment opportunities in the home country. So, that is why government adopts tariff policy or taxes are imposed on imports so that they become costlier and demand for homemade goods increases. Or sometimes subsidies are given to the domestic industries so that they can produce at a low rate and can grow. So, now we will see what is the need for protection or what are the advantages of protection or arguments in favor of protection. A number of arguments have been put forward in favor of protection. They are number one is infant industry argument. The oldest argument in favor of controlled trade was advanced by Alexander Hamilton in 1790. It was developed further by Frederick List in the 1840s as an argument for tariff protection to German industries which were then in a developing stage. This argument was later supported by Mill, Marshall and Taussig, etc. According to this argument, during the early stage of development, infant industries require protection from keen competition from long established foreign industries. Nurse the baby, protect the child and free the adult is a well-known saying in this regard. It is also held that protection should not be given indiscriminately but only to those infant industries which have potentialities to develop fast and become self-financing and efficient in the long run. But this argument has been criticized by different economists. The infant industry is criticized on the following grounds. Number one is, it is difficult to decide correctly if an infant industry deserves protection. Once the protection is given, even if it is found unsound, vested interests are created and it becomes almost impossible to withdraw it. All sorts of industries begin to claim for protection on the basis of infant industry. This brings political corruption. An infant is always an infant. Protected industries become negligent and depend more and more upon state assistance. Even when the infant becomes a powerful giant, he is unwilling to relinquish his teething ring. Despite these criticisms, the infant industry argument has wide scope of applicability in underdeveloped countries. Second is the diversification of industry argument. List and other economists advocated for protection to diversify the industries of a country. Excessive specialization leads to over-dependence of a country on the other countries. It is dangerous politically and economically. In times of war, imports from foreign countries become difficult and people have to suffer hardships. A recession or depression in the industries depending upon other countries will seriously affect the economy. So, in order to bring about a harmonious and balanced growth of all industries and self-sufficiency, it is necessary to bring about diversification of industries through protection. Criticism of this argument is all countries don't possess all types of natural resources and in adequate quantities to be self-sufficient. Practically, no country can be completely self-sufficient. It goes against the principle of comparative cost advantage and relative specialization as a basis of international trade. Complete isolation is not possible in the modern world. Therefore, the diversification argument in favor of protection is quite weak. Another argument is promotion of employment argument. Tariff protection is also suggested as an effective remedy to the serious unemployment problem like the one the world experienced during the depression of 1930s. Imposition of tariffs on imports directly competing with domestic products helps to expand employment opportunities in import competing industries by securing the domestic market. Other industries related to protected industries grow due to forward and backward linkages. Output and employment grow multiple times due to the working of multiplier. The tariff protection as a means of employment generation has, however, certain limitations. This argument favoring protection is based on the assumption that exports of the country will not be affected or that other countries will continue to import as much as they used to before the tariff imposition. Even if other countries don't take retaliatory steps, tariff protection may not be so effective. Tariff on imports reduce the exports of the tariff affected countries and thereby generate unemployment there. Unemployment leads to fall in their imports. It ultimately reduces the exports and thereby employment in the tariff imposing country. So, the employment generation through tariff protection may get counterbalanced with the unemployment in the export sector. This may also result in temporary gain but permanent misallocation of resources. If the unemployment problem is global, tariff protection will not provide solution to this problem. Now, another argument in favor of protection is balance of payments argument. If a country is having deficit in its balance of payments and it does not possess sufficient reserves of gold or foreign exchange to make payments to the surplus country, it can put restrictions on imports through tariffs and correct disequilibrium in the balance of payments. Tariff protection is better than devaluation as a method for improving balance of payments position of a country. Another argument is terms of trade argument. The imposition of tariff duty will lead to a rise in the price of importing country and a fall in the price of exporting country. And if the demand for the commodity is elastic, then the price in the exporting country will fall to a greater extent. Thus, the burden of tariff duty is borne by the exporting country. Terms of trade improves for the importing country. However, the terms of trade could be expected to improve only if the foreign supply is inelastic. If the foreign supply is elastic, tariff or quota is unlikely to improve the terms of trade. Foreign countries may also retaliate by imposing counter tariffs. The validity of this argument is also doubtful. Retaliation argument. Tariff is also a weapon to beat down foreign duties that affect a country's exports. Tariff so imposed is called retaliation. If trading partners are imposing tariff duties on their imports, one country cannot afford liberal policy. It has no alternative but to resort to tariff protection. Another is the revenue argument. Whenever tariffs are imposed on the imports, this brings revenue to the government of the importing country. So, this is also a source of revenue. In India, custom duties have been a very productive source of state revenue. Bargaining strength. It is argued that a country can use its protectionist policy as a bargaining point for obtaining trade concessions from its trading partners. This argument is reasonably valid where the exporting country has some kind of a natural monopoly. This argument also suffers from some limitations, which are: an underdeveloped country suffers from inherent weakness vis-a-vis developed ones and cannot use protectionist measures as an effective bargaining tool. Protectionist measures, particularly by a developing country, are prone to invite retaliation by others. Anti-dumping argument. Protection is also resorted as an anti-dumping measure. Dumping certainly can harm the domestic industry. The relief the consumers get will only be temporary. Sometimes, after ruining the domestic industry by dumping, the foreign firms obtain the monopoly powers and exploit the home market. So, domestic industries need protection against dumping. Even WTO has made provisions for anti-dumping duties. Whenever it is proved that a country is dumping its product in the other country and selling it at a very low rate, then the importing country can tell it to the WTO, it can file an application, and if it is being proved that actually the dumping is taking place, then the importing country gets the right to put anti-dumping duties. The pauper labor argument. Now, what is this pauper labor argument? If in the home country wage level is substantially high compared to the foreign countries, the foreign producers will dominate the home market because the cheap labor will allow them to sell goods cheaper than the domestic goods, and this will affect the interests of the domestic labor. So, tariffs are imposed to meet competition from a pauper labor country. Conservation of natural resources argument. Carey, Patton and Jevons argue that protection is essential to conserve the natural resources of a country. This argument is particularly applicable to countries which export minerals and other essential raw materials. To avoid exhaustion of such resources, there is need for high export duties. Key industry argument. Key and basic industries like iron and steel and heavy chemicals, etc., are essential for the rapid economic development of a country. Protection is essential for the development of these type of industries. In India too, the basic and heavy industries were protected so that we don't depend much on the import of machinery, iron and steel from the other countries. Keeping money at home argument. Some economists say that imports lead to flight of money to foreign countries. If tariffs are imposed on imports, the same money can be used to buy domestic goods and services. So, money remains at home, but imports are paid by exports, and in that sense, keeping money at home argument for protection has no sense in it. National defense argument. Depending on the foreign countries for the defense requirement is rather foolish, because factors like changes in political relations can do serious damage to a country's defense interest. So, defense industries must be protected and developed. Strategic trade policy. Strategic trade policy, which advocates protection and government cooperation to certain high-tech industries in the developed countries, is somewhat similar to the infant industry argument applied to the developing countries. According to this argument, government support should be accorded to gain comparative advantage in the high technology industries which are crucial for the future of the nation, such as semiconductors, computers and telecommunication, etc. State support to certain industries is essential to prevent market monopolization. So, these were some of the arguments in favor of protection. Now, we will see what are the demerits of protection. The following defects are generally attributed to protection. Protection is against the interest of the consumers as it increases price and reduces variety and choice. Protection is given by imposing tariffs on the imports, and whenever tariffs are imposed, price of the imported commodity will increase. So, consumers will have to pay a high price for the imports, and if quotas are fixed, then consumers may not be able to get the variety of the goods they want to have. Protection makes producers and sellers less quality conscious. When producer knows that they are protected by the government and they are able to sell their product now because of the tariffs on imports, so they don't get an incentive to improve the quality of the product or to reduce the cost of production. So, this is the drawback of protection. It encourages domestic monopolies. When domestic industries are protected, they don't get much competition from the foreign companies. So, they become monopolies and they go on charging high prices, and they may not be improving the quality, they may be producing less. In India too, till 1991, there was too much protection given to the domestic industries, and we all know that monopolistic tendencies went on rising. That is why after 1991, the policy of liberalization and globalization was adopted so that the competition could rise and the producers or could improve the quality of the product, or they may think of reducing the cost of production. Even inefficient firms may feel secure under protection. Inefficient firms, because they are being protected, so they don't like to improve and they are discouraged from taking innovations. Then protection leaves the arena open to corruption. Every industry wants to be protected by the government. It wants that it should not be able, it is not able to face the competition from the foreign companies. It wants to sell its product. So, they want that government should go on giving them subsidies, or the tariffs should be imposed on the imports. So, they want to influence the decisions of the government. So, in this way, political corruption also increases in the country. It reduces the volume of trade. How? When one country starts imposing tariffs on its imports become costlier, imports are reduced. If its imports are reduced, this means exports of the other country will get reduced. Then the other country will also retaliate. It will also start imposing tariffs on in its imports. This way, by reducing the imports, exports of the other countries go on getting reduced and the total international trade reduces. Protection leads to uneconomic utilization of world resources. Free trade advocates that The trade should be according to specialization, according to comparative cost advantage. The countries which can produce at a comparatively cheaper rate should produce for other countries also, and this would lead to more production, best quality products and cheaper products for the whole world and better utilization of resources. But if the industries are protected, there may not be the proper utilization of the resources. So dear students, this was all about that whether we should have free trade or protection. And you can see, you can read in the newspaper every day, you get some news about the protection, etc., and you will be able to understand more when you have gone through this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much. And we would like to thank Dr. Kamlesh Ghakkar for giving us the entire series on microeconomics. And today we have ended up with the entire series. Dear friends, if you have not watched all the lectures till now, then we would like to tell you all that we have uploaded all the lectures on YouTube on microeconomics, with the help of which you can see the lectures, the number of time you wanted, or the lectures you have missed previously could be watched on YouTube. So we would like to thank Dr. Kamlesh Ghakkar, and we believe that we would be starting a new series very soon.
Okay, thank you, Geetika. I hope I will try my best, and I would like to give more lectures on macroeconomics, and students will gain from that. This is what I want.
Definitely. So we have ended the series on microeconomics, and very soon we are going to start the series on macroeconomics. Dear friends, keep watching us, and do write to us at info.cec@nic.in. We would be meeting again soon. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you once again.